There's a new custom flashlight on the market, and it is from Vero Engineering. Welcome back to Shul Lights. So there is a new American custom called the Photon by Vero Engineering. Now, if you have not heard of Vero before, it's probably just because you're a flashlight geek like me, and this is actually their first foray into the flashlight market, but it is a strong one. So part of that is due to the fact that Joseph Vero, the CEO and lead engineer of Vero, really kind of knows what he's doing. But also it's because he's partnered with Jordy Wallace of Focusworks up in Canada. And as you know, Jordy's been making flashlights for like a hot minute. So let's take a look at their website real quick. This is Vero Engineering's website. You can see they're an EDC company, make a lot of knives, and front and center there is the Photon. It says available soon. Now, the story, I'm going to give you a little story first. The story on this light is a small batch, I think under 50. I'm guessing at that, was made for Blade Show Atlanta just about a week ago, and I happened to be at Blade Show. Now, I wasn't seeking out their light. I heard something was coming, but you know, I usually wait to hear what the scuttlebutt is. Now, I was at the Charles Wiggins booth, and a customer came by looking for Charles's lights, and he had one of these in his hands. Now, I said, hey, cool, man, you brought this to me to take a look at, right? No, he hadn't, but I pulled it out, and I started reading it on the Sekonic light meter that I brought. And I started taking a look at it. And I went, hey, this thing's pretty dang cool. So great first impression by me. Then that night, there was a kind of a kerfuffle on Reddit of all places where people were not well receiving what Joe Vero was laying down about his light. And having already held the light in person and looked at it, I knew that they weren't correct. I knew that their concerns about price point and quality were way off based. So I kind of wrote up what I had already seen in the 5 minutes I was holding the light there at Charles Wiggins' booth. Then the next day, I went over to the Vero booth to share my findings with Joseph at his booth, and he was kind enough to hand me one so I could really put it through the paces and really think about it. And I've got some good stuff for you. Okay. So first off, let's just take a look at the box because this box is amazeballs. Seriously, I've never seen a box this great on a custom light yet. First off, it's 3D printed, but it doesn't look 3D printed. I mean, I 3D print myself and they did it correctly. There's, the layer lines are very difficult to spot and it's very robust. So it's got this great presentation. This kind of pops off this little thing here. And on the inside here, you have a sleeve with a metal laser engraved COA with the serial number on it. Then setting that aside, you got the light wrapped in a microfiber cloth and a battery ready to go. One interesting thing I noticed was the battery was fully charged, like 4.2 volts, which I was surprised about. Joseph, if you watch this video, I would have your batteries at 3.8, only because that way, if someone doesn't use their light for a while, the battery chemistry is not going to degrade. I mean, it's kind of tempting to have it at 100% for the user ready to go. But I think it's better just to have it at storage charge and let them, top it off when they get it. Now, before I get more into the case here, I want to tell you something about this case. Okay, like here, let's put the top back on here. There is feet on the bottom here, rubber feet. Now, that is not like the most amazing thing ever, but I was like, rubber feet on the box, what gives? Turns out that this box isn't just a box for, purposes of holding the light. It's also a display case. Notice on the inside here, it's a little EDC case, and you take the flashlight out, you set it there, and then you can put, other EDC stuff in there. And this is meant to be used long-term. This, I don't know. It's the best case I've ever seen on a custom flashlight. I'm tickled pink with it. Let's take the flashlight out, show you in the case here how it looks. Boop. There you go. All right. Now, I'm going to take the battery out, take this little piece of foam out, take the battery out. I'm going to load it into the light. Okay. And let's get to what I think about this flashlight. Okay. I don't think there's anything really quite like it on the EDC market right now. I really don't. So it shares a lot of commonality with the customs flashlights that have come before it. Like it's got a McClicky. It's, there's a lot of things about it that you're going to see that it draws from previous lights. However, it's a 14500, right? It's the long, AA sized cell that you just saw. It's not AA, it's not alkaline, it's lithium ion, but it has like a big head. So most customs like this Hanko number 7 here are 18350 cells. So they're kind of, wider and shorter. And if you look at this light, it looks kind of long and kind of big, but see, that's due to the fact that it's a 14500. It's a longer cell. And so I was thinking, what other lights do I know of that have a large head like this and a long 14500 cell? And you might not have heard of this one, but this is the Limelight by Josh Lewis. He made a small batch of these and they were selling on the custom torch community on Facebook. And these two lights are the closest lights I can think of, in terms of what they share. They both run on McClickies. They're both 14500s. The only difference really is that the Limelight here is an MCR 20 reflector, and this is a 20 millimeter Leadell TIR optic. So really, this light is almost identical to this one, except for aesthetics and the fact that if you want that like characteristic TIR optic beam, which is a little softer, a little floodier than the, typical reflector beam, which is going to be a hard, hot spot and then a just kind of even spill, then I can't think of another production light on the market right now, except for the Vero Engineering Photon. Okay. So also I want to point out that typical customs like this Hanko, yeah, they're shorter. So maybe, looking at the size comparison here, it's kind of a little like, why would I want to light this long? But it feels so great in your hand to have this thin 14500 svelte body tube. And I know that, when we get into this level of EDC lights, aesthetics does matter. So let's take a look at the light itself and go over its features. As I said, this light is made by Jordy Wallace of FocusWorks. And the reason I mention that is because if I take a look at, for example, the Limelight over here, the Limelight has, when I undo the head here, it has a really large opening. And the reason why the opening is so large is because this is standard with a Mac EDC or a Hanko or, a Citadel threading and size. So you can see that the head is just kind of like a barrel and the body has a really large opening. And then the 14500 kind of sits in the middle there. And you can see there's all this extra metal to kind of taper it down. Well, that makes the light maybe a little, heavier to have all that extra metal. And when you look at this light, it's got its seam right here in the middle. So when I take the head off, it kind of looks a little, more purpose-built to me. This is the way I'd expect the head to look. And part of the reason is because the threads here are not standard Hanko or Mac. In fact, what they are is FocusWorks standard, which makes sense, right? Because Jordy made the light. So here is a FocusWorks F2. And if I unthread this, you'll find that these heads are completely interchangeable. In fact, you can see now how similar these body tubes look. They look almost identical, right? Now I can take the F2 and thread it on here. Be careful not to cross thread, right? And, vice versa, okay? So if you already have used the FocusWorks F2, you'll notice that really what's going on here, the Photon has just stepped up to a much larger optic. And that larger optic is going to mean more candela and a more intense beam. So The larger head on this light is not without reason. A couple refinements on this light over the F2 is that the tail now has a kind of cutout right here. Let's take a look. See this little dip? And honestly, when you hold the light, you're going to naturally want to put the clip where your fingers are here, and your thumb just easily articulates the light right here. So it is a welcome addition. I like the simple styling of this light, and I also want to point out that this vertical two-hole spacing is smart. Oh, it's smart. Take a look at the Limelight. The Limelight here, which is, as I said, its closest competition, has a horizontal two-hole spacing, which does mean that you can use any horizontal two-hole clip like this TI Designs clip right here. But it does make for kind of a large looking, clip situation. This vertical two-hole spacing is not just random. It is exactly a steel flame vertical two-hole system like you'd find for pens. So here is a steel flame clip that was designed for pen use, and I can take this clip off and put that on there right like that. I just want to point out that the torch clips, which are typically horizontal, are much larger. I mean, not even just what's emblazoned on them, but look at the tip over here. The tip is a fatter steel clip than on the pens. So by doing this vertical pattern here, it opens up a host of slimmer clips, which I think look really great on the slim body. The include clip is nice and springy, but it's got a little pinch point there to hold on to your pocket. And it's got the Vero branding, and the brushed finish on the light itself matches their knives. So it's got a finish that if you like to match your EDC, the knife to the flashlight, it looks really great. Before we leave Ergonomics, I should say one last thing, and that is the boot here actually has the FocusWorks logo on it. And my only gripe, so this light is super solid, okay? So I'm going to have little tiny niggles. There's only 2 of them, and they're really minor, okay? One is that if you take a look at the boot has a little squish in it before the clicky starts engaging. So for example, if I look at the FocusWorks F2 boot, which I mean, it's the same boot, right? These are both FocusWorks, but this I can feel the plastic is just under the surface. Actually, even on Geordie's, there's a little play in there before it engages, but here there's more, okay? Now, I mentioned this to Joe at the show, and he said, oh yeah, I'm going to get new boots. I'm sure of it. He's probably going to get something, I would assume, with his Vero V on it or something like that. So, Joseph, if you're watching this review, make sure that you get a boot that's a little less tall so that the boot sits right over the plastic shaft of the McClicky, so there's no play at all. That would solve that niggle for me. But honestly, even if nothing was done at all, the light is very usable as is. All right, let's go over the driver and the UI. Now, here's the thing about that. The driver is the venerable H17F from Dr. Jones. What an excellent driver. This driver is pretty complicated in a good way. You can set it up to, be a 1-mode light, a 3-mode light, like, low, medium, high. Add in a moonlight, 6 modes. I mean, you can even set up 2 different configurations and switch between them easily. It's a very configurable driver. You can set every single mode to exactly the lumens you want. It's just probably the gold standard for custom flashlights. And it's made in the United States, in Utah, by Mountain Electronics. So this light was machined in Canada, and then the assembly, I assume, was also in Canada, but then the electronics were made in the United States. So this is a North American light. Now, I'm not going to go over how to set up all the different, bits about the Dr. Jones H17F driver, because it's complicated. But you can look on my channel for how to set it up. I got another video on it. I'll put it in the corner right here so you can click. But I want to point out, if you're the kind of person that doesn't want to set up all that programming, then don't worry about it. The way it comes is with a moonlight. You can see it's barely on. And then you lift up and tap again, lift up, tap again. And as you do that, you're going to go through the modes, and I count 1, 2, 3, 4 modes. And I think that's the standard way the H17F driver is set up. But I also want to point out that there is a hidden 5th mode. From off, you can literally just double tap and it goes straight to the highest output, which is turbo. The quality of light that this flashlight makes is superb. It's basically the best color temperature, tint, and beam you're going to get. So let's take a look at it on my Sekonic here. I'll just go ahead and go straight to turbo and do a measurement. So it's got a 4,500 Kelvin emitter. It's bang on right at 4,500, as you can see. And it's a little bit under the black body locus at negative 44, which makes it rosy. Look at the CRI here. It's 95 CRI with an R9 of 91. Now, I want to point out that the sun isn't even 100 CRI. The sun is 98. So this thing is approaching sunlight in terms of the quality of color rendition you're going to look at when you use it. Now, the output is also stellar. Let's take a look at the integrating sphere here, and I'll go ahead and put it on to moonlight, and you can see that it doesn't even register a lumen because the moonlight can be that low on it. Now I'm going to double tap for turbo, click, click. You can see it was about almost 880 lumens at startup, which is really good for an EGF 519A, 3535 emitter. And look at it sustain, man. This thing isn't dropping at all. And that's because of the fact that the head does have a lot of mass to dissipate the heat. Even though it's titanium, which isn't great thermally, it's doing amazingly here. So we're coming up at the 30-second mark right about now. Look at that. Incredible sustain from this light. Dropping off a little bit, but still over 800. Now to compare, I've got the Limelight here with the MCR 20, and it's got the same driver, Dr. Jones, H17F, and if I double tap, you can see him at about 700 lumens. But, part of that was because it was a Firefly's emitter. It was a little bit warmer. There's some, differences, but a single emitter on a H17F driver is usually around 700, 750 lumens. To get almost 900, that's like Samsung LH351D territory, but those were green. Those are green and ugly. So whatever they're doing in here to get this thing to put out 880 lumens, and honestly, the only thing I can think of is, it's the same driver that's used in all these customs, so it's just got to be a really efficient, large optic. That optic is doing a great job. Something I failed to mention in the ergonomics section is that in front of the large Lidl TIR optic, you've got a piece of sapphire crystal. So that's not glass, folks. That's actually sapphire. So I love to see them using these premium materials like titanium and sapphire in the build of this light. Okay, so the design of the actual host is great, but how's the beam? And remember, that's what sets this thing apart. It's a 14500 EDC light with a large TIR optic. So let's take a look at the reflector on the Limelight, and we're going to look at the wall here. And so you can see that when I put this on to turbo, you've got a really concentrated hot spot, and then out here, you've got kind of a weak spill. That's the typical reflector kind of, look. Now, what does the optic give you, the TIR? Well, it's going to give you kind of a soft hot spot. Well, not so soft. Notice it's nice and focused, so that's awesome. But notice that it kind of fades away. So that's the TIR difference, is it's kind of softer. It's not so hardened and defined and, segregated. Now, the one thing I will say, though, is we're using a square emitter in here, right? So if you white wall hunt like this, the only other niggle I have about this light, and it's not a big deal, and some people aren't going to mind at all, is that in the very edges of the spill, so let me come down here. So, notice that you're not seeing my hand now, and there's the shadow of my hand. Notice as I rotate, Can you see that's a little asymmetrical? It's not a big deal. I'm telling you, you have to look for it. It's only the kind of thing that a flashlight reviewer like I would look for. So if you know that you want perfectly circular spill patterns, then this is going to give you kind of a squircle, not square, not circle, but kind of an amorphous, kind of rounded corner, squarish thing, because that's the shape of the emitter. But inside that spill, the beam is excellent. So let's go take it outside and see what it looks like.
Okay, we're outside with the Vero Photon. Now let's take a look at how this large TIR little optic looks compared to a traditional reflector on the Limelight, as well as the smaller reflector on the FocusWorks F2. This particular F2 has an LH351D, so this is a Samsung emitter. It's 5000K, so it's pretty close in temperature to the 4500 on the Sneechia 519A that the Photon has, but it's going to be more green. So let's go straight to turbo on this nearby tree, which is 20 meters. Not this tree, but the next tree right here is going to be 55 meters. And then the back tree line, if any of the flashlights make it, will be 150 meters. So let's go ahead and go straight to turbo. You can see that is no problem getting that 20 meters, and then that 55 meters clearly lit up by the F2. You can see how floody the beam is because this large optic on the Photon is going to look different, but we're on the small optic of the F2. Now let's take a look at that tree line in the back and see if, hard to say. I don't think the F2 is making it back there to 150 meters. By comparison, let's take a look at the Photon. So I'll go straight to turbo. Oh, that's so much more candela. Oh my gosh, big difference. You can see that there is a more concentrated hotspot and the spill I was talking about. Let's tilt down a little bit. And let me go to a medium mode here to show you what I was talking about the squircle here. You can see as I rotate the light, I'll just rotate it a little bit, that it is a little bit not circular. It's not a big deal. And you know, in use when on these trees here, you're not going to notice it at all. I'm just saying that that's just part and parcel to getting an optic. But the optic is going to look really clean on objects. It just looks so smooth. Compare it to the reflector, this MCR 20S on the Limelight. Let me go to, there we go, medium mode. And you can see that it's got an intense hot spot. See, intense hot spot and then just spill. So it has a different look to it. This is a warmer emitter. I think it's 3500 Kelvin if I remember correctly. Let me go to turbo. So there's turbo. Let's turbo on the Photon. And so there is turbo on the Limelight and the Photon. 55 meter tree, 55 meter tree, okay. And then in the back there, you know, these are EDC lights. I'm not surprised they're not quite making it all the way to 150 meters, but they definitely illuminate the street well. Before we leave outside, I just want to point out the difference between the reflector. Let's go to medium here. So I got the hot spot and there's that very circular and even spill. And then let's use the Photon here at the same output. And you can see that the hot spot is bigger. See that? It's bigger, but it's also the spill kind of starts bright and then fades away. And the spill isn't as large, so there's more light in the spill per area than there is over here. You can see the spill comes all the way out to about here. It's a very large spill. And then here it comes to about like this. So it's just a difference in beam. So which beam you choose is completely up to you, but if you want a 14500 light with a 20 millimeter optic, I think this is the only one on the market. All right, we're in my darkened garage and I will show you the difference between the Photon's optic here and then what we have in like a typical reflector. So let's start with the reflector, okay? I'm on a low mode here in the garage And you see how there's a hot spot that's really defined, and then we've got this spill out towards the side. And as I look around, you can see that it's a little kind of too intense in the middle, and then the spill is, you know, darker. Now, let's flip over to the Vero Photon, go to the same level, and notice that the optic in it produces a much more graduated, even beam, which is more aesthetically pleasing. So that really is what differentiates the Vero Photon from previous offerings, is this large TIR optic. And I think a lot of users are gonna really like the way it looks.
So this light is a solid performer, and you know, it's made by a veteran, you know, Jordy Wallace. He knows what he's doing. It's got the high current McClicky, it's got the large TIR for a lot of candela and throw, and it's putting out almost 900 lumens on a single emitter. So, you know, you can't do much better than this. And the price point, at least right now, is sub 500 for a North American made flashlight. So that's really good in the custom flashlight space. You know, my channel has people from all walks of life visiting it. And anytime I hear someone complain about, you know, a $500 American custom, I always kind of scratch my head a little bit. And the reason why is because, of course, making small batch lights handmade by one person in a shop in the United States is going to cost about $400 to $500. You know, and it's funny because the same people that seem to say, I want an American made flashlight, then tend to go, but not over $100. And it's like, you can't have both, man. If you want a flashlight that's made in China, then sure, you can get a flashlight for a, you know, sub $100 range. Of course, the quality control is a little suspect, and it just, you know, usually doesn't have the same feel or design that you're going to get from a small batch American manufacturer. I'm not trying to convert anybody. That's not the goal here. If somebody likes production lights from China, then go get that. But I think it's interesting that people are basically asking for water that isn't wet. They're saying, I want an American made flashlight, but I'm not going to pay American salaries, right? So that's always a weird thing for me. But if you're in the custom flashlight game, and you know, over here you can see that I definitely am, $480 is actually quite low. You know, Jeff Hanko's lights start at $900 these days. Citadel's were in the $800 range. Even the DC1 for titanium is $550 and up. So this is under that 500 mark. So again, I have no complaints about the price. I know that it's not for everybody, but you know, it makes sense. All right, so I hope you enjoyed this review, and go ahead and check out my new content. I've got stuff coming out all the time here during the summer. So, you know, subscribe to the channel so you can see it. And you know what? I'll see you in the next review.